So we are discussing the syllabus of public international law, and we are at module 7, that is state jurisdiction. We seen earlier state jurisdiction is a very basic core principle of public international law because it is directly linked with the principle of territorial sovereignty, because every state is entitled to exercise exclusive jurisdiction over its territory. And that's what there were different kinds of territories, be it a land territory, water territory, or territorial sea, etc., airspace, and even outer space. So far as outer space is concerned, the principle of universal jurisdiction is observed because of the outer space treaty. It doesn't belongs to any particular state, but it belongs to the entire world. So either two we discussed yesterday. Today we will discuss the jurisdiction based on nationality, because nationality, now the concept of nationality is related to individuals. That how individuals can be a subject of international law because of the concept of nationality. Individuals are considered as a subject of international law because nationality is a facet which is attached to the individual. So, to fix liability on any state, it is necessary to determine the nationality of that particular individual. Because later we are going to see another module, that is modules relating to state responsibility. So, to fix responsibility of state by whose citizen, or by whose nationals that particular act to be is done is requires to be established. So by this way, nationality plays an role into the international law. So there were several modes by which nationality can be acquired. It may be acquired by a number of ways that we will see there. Again, double nationality principle was also observed in some nations. We will see what that double nationality principle is. In India, a single citizenship principle is observed. So audio video is mismatched. Is it so? Is it so? Whether audio and video is not matching, please check your device because others are listening properly. Yes. So double nationality principle, you seen the silent features of Indian Constitution wherein we seen that single citizenship norm is observed by Indian Constitution, but some nations have double nationality. We will see those double nationality principle and nationality of married woman, and what is the Indian positions over the nationality of married woman, whether nationality of married woman change with the marriage. So these aspects we have to see in the topic jurisdiction based on nationality. Then one another topic in state jurisdictions we have to see is what is the significance of statelessness, because there are certain persons, because of certain events they become statelessness in the sense that does not belongs to any state. Now when this situation will arise, that we will see, then what is to be done, what international treatment is to be given to such group, they were called as a statelessness. And for this sake the United Nations had established a separate organization that is called as United Nations High Commission on Refugee, because they have to take refuge in another state and they have to prove that they are stateless. And the concept of stateless is called as a statelessness, means they doesn't belong to, or they doesn't have nationality of either state. So that topic we have to see here. Then the another aspect is extradition. We discussed some aspect of extradition earlier yesterday, meaning and definition of extradition. Extradition is nothing but a formal treaty entered between two nations or more than two nations to surrender fugitive offenders from one country to another, or to cooperate with the another country for establishing criminal justice in both the countries, because the main purpose of the law of crime is to give punishment. And if that object is not served, because for giving punishment, the person is physically available so that harm can be inflicted. So punishment cannot be given remotely, neither virtually. So the person should be physically available. And if the person after the trial or during the trial, if he is in bail or not arrested, fled away to another country, then the question of territorial jurisdiction arose, and the purpose of punishment may not be served. So, in order to serve that purpose, as an international cooperation, extradition treaty is to be made between two nations, and then that particular accused is to be surrendered before the nation's court, and latter punishment is to be executed. So for that sake, the process of extradition is made. Then the question is what that process of extradition is, what kind of offenders has to be surrendered, what is the process, etc. What is the rule of speciality, that we will see there. Then one another aspect related to extradition is asylum. Asylum is nothing but giving shelter to the offenders if they were persecuted in another country, and because of that persecution they fled away from their country and take assistance of another country, then such country gives them protection. Such protection is diplomatic in nature. Such protection is called as asylum. So, like Dalai Lama, we had given asylum to Dalai Lama once he fled from Tibet, China to India. So, once there is asylum, no extradition takes place. So, asylum ends extradition. So, it is said in international law, whenever asylum begins, extradition ends. So, the that concept of asylum, we have to see what are the kind of asylum, where asylum is to be given. So two kinds of asylums are there, territorial and extraterritorial. If the asylum is given within the state's own territory, it is territorial. If it is given in another state, it is extraterritorial. So the jurisdiction and these aspects we have to see in state jurisdiction. So territorial and other is extraterritorial jurisdiction. So you know now section 3 and 4 of Indian Penal Code, as well as the provision of Indian constitutions. When Indian court or Indian legislations have effect extraterritorially, when Indian law go beyond territory, and what article 245 or 246 I think says on extraterritorial, leave about article 245 246, but look into the section 3 and 4 of Indian Penal Code. They are having extraterritorial operations. So the Parliament of India is empowered to make law having extraterritorial operation. So cite any law in chat box which is having extraterritorial operation, and what is the test to make law operate extraterritorially, because you read constitution as well as you had studied section 3 and 4 of Indian Penal Code as well as Hindu Marriage Act. These are nothing but the laws having extraterritorial operation. Now the question is whether these extraterritorial operations are not violative to principle of territorial sovereignty of that particular state. Suppose Indian law is making applicable into America. Doctrine of territorial nexus. You studied in IPC section 3.4. If the citizen of India commits crime abroad, the Indian courts are having jurisdiction, or if the foreign citizen or citizen of America commits crime in the places situated in India, in the context of today's Information Technology Act, it is having extraterritorial operation. A citizen in America get an unauthorized access to the computer source located in India. So crime is committed in India, but person is sitting beyond India. So here, Indian courts, Indian laws are having extraterritorial operation because there is territorial nexus between the crime committed and accused. That's what such extraterritorial operations were allowed by the Constitution of India. And 3 and 4 of IPC is an example. Even Hindu Marriage Act, the person who are domiciled in India but presently in America, married under Hindu Marriage Act, their marriage is valid as per Hindu Marriage Act. Similarly, IT Act or several other legislations that we will see in extraterritorial jurisdiction. So though extraterritorial jurisdiction is there, it is not the violation of principle of territorial sovereignty of other country. Then we will move towards module 8 that deals with the state immunities and privileges. Do you have syllabus with you? As I already posted the syllabus in classroom. Classroom in the sense Google Classroom. Those who are not joined yet, I had sent mail yesterday to all. Mail of WhatsApp link of the group as well as the mail of joining classroom. So inform others to join via that link. Okay, so module 8 is state immunities and privileges. Now two concepts are appearing here, immunities and privileges. Immunity, what immunity is, not immunity in the sense of medical science, which is discussed today in the context of COVID pandemic. That immunity we are not expecting. Immunities in legal sense. Certain persons are immune from not corona, immune from, yes, exceptional, immune from law itself. Law doesn't touch them because they are immune, and that immunity is conferred by law itself because this concept is a part of jurisprudence. Right, duty, immunities, privileges, liability, disability. This concept differs from each other. So immunities are conferred by law. So immunities are conferred by law. What immunity is? To create exceptions, a legal status wherein individual cannot be held liable for violation of law. Yes, absolutely right. Immunity is a protection created by law and make certain person immune from the crutches of law or law doesn't reach to them. Such kind of concept is called as immunity. These were created because the person can work without fear and favor. Even privileges are similar in nature. Privileges, certain rights, extra rights were conferred. If the person is privileged, he cannot be held liable. Immunity in the sense, law cannot touch him. Privileges, certain extra rights were given. Parliamentary privileges, you might have been listened into the constitution. What parliamentary privileges are? Yes, for protection. Privileges were conferred on the parliamentarians. Parliamentarians, in the sense member of parliament, even in state legislative assemblies, privileges were conferred equally. And during the parliament, during the session, once they are sitting in parliament and said anything, they cannot be held responsible for any wrongs committed by them, except the breach of parliamentary privileges to be considered by the speaker. So privileges are given so that they can have a freedom to do their work. Immunities were conferred, so law cannot touch them. So such immunities and privileges were conferred upon the state itself as well as upon the agent who are acting for the state in foreign country. They were called as diplomatic agent. So in this model, we are going to see what state immunity is, whether state itself is immune from prosecuting into the court. Now to discuss this immunity, there were certain theories. Absolute theory means absolute immunity, restrictive theory of immunity, immune on certain conditions, then what International Law Commission says over this immunity, and whether state can waive its immunity. Waiver of right. So, like waiver of immunity. To waive means we are not holding the immunity, let come and prosecute us. State can be said so. That is nothing but the waiver of immunity. Give away the right, yes. So that we have to see in first point. Then in second, significance and importance of diplomatic agent. Why diplomatic agents were appointed? What is their importance and how they were classified into different kind of agents. So these diplomatic agents are nothing but the IFS officers selected through Union Public Service Commission in Indian Foreign Service. They were appointed by the Secretary of Ministry of External Affairs as a diplomatic agent in foreign country, in embassies situated in different countries. So to establish cooperation, we will see in recognition, to establish cooperation within two and more states, every state has created its embassy in another state. So in that embassies, these diplomatic agents were appointed for different aspects. So what their classification is, what is their functions, why they were appointed, and what kind of immunities and privileges they enjoy, that we are going to study under this module. So certain privileges were given in the syllabus itself, like inviolability of diplomatic agent, persons of diplomatic agents as well as their premises. Persons in the sense, the persons of diplomatic agents were inviolable. Inviolable means they cannot be touched, they cannot be arrested. Person in the sense. So in guardianship, you heard about this word. The guardian can be appointed for minor's person and minor's property. Here also, persons of diplomatic agent and premises. Premises means the building wherein they are residing. So persons, chat box, persons of minor. You may recall the Guardianship Act. The guardians were appointed for the persons of minor, recognized by law. Else, what I want to know is the what is mean by person here in this context. The person of minor or persons of diplomatic agent being capable of having legal rights, not in that sense. Persons and natural person, artificial person, I am not talking in that sense or neither expecting the answer in that sense. secretary, family of minor, else guardian is appointed for the persons of minor, your minor's person, state. See, again I will give you an hint. A guardian can be appointed for minor's person and minor's property. For two things, guardian can be appointed for minor persons and minor property. So what here means minor's person, same meaning is sorry expected here also. The persons of diplomatic agent. Person means body. Nobody can injure the minor, and to protect the minor's persons means minor's body, minor's hand, minor's eyes, minor's legs. If somebody physically try to injure, so persons means physical existence of the minor. So to give protection to the minor's person, minor's body from third person, guardian is appointed. And if the minor is having property, to keep that property safe or to manage that property effectively, guardian is appointed. So in that sense, here also, diplomatic agent's person is violable, means nobody can attack physically on the diplomatic agent. And for premises, the offices and the area where they are residing. That's what the attack on embassy is to be treated as the attack on the nations itself, because that is direct violations of the basic principle of international law, that is diplomatic immunities and privileges. So the diplomatic agents cannot be arrested in another country. If that we will see, then whether they are licensed to commit crime, that is not so. There were restrictions when they will not be arrested, etc. That we will see in detail. So they are immune from the criminal jurisdictions. They were immune from the civil jurisdictions. They are having freedom of movement, freedom of religion in another country, travel, worship, etc. So those aspects relating to diplomatic agent, their right, privileges, immunities, we will discuss in module 8 along with the immunity of state. Then module 9, the law of state responsibility. So here we have to discuss the responsibility of state for internationally wrongful act committed through the state agency or committed by way of state sponsored project or any activity of state if results into violation of principles of international law, violation of treaties, the law of state responsibility arises. So here we have to see what is the nature and basis of state responsibility, on what basis state were held responsible, what are the elements of state responsibility. You can compare the responsibility in tune with individual responsibility, because same jurisprudence is observed. When individual is held responsible for his wrongful act, if there is wrongful conduct on his part, there is breach of law. Similarly, if the treaty of environment, treaties relating to environment provides for the carbon emission norms, and if state doesn't follow that norms, then it will result into international liability. You might have been noticed that certain vehicles were changed BS4 something after the order of Delhi High Court and later the order of Supreme Court to degrade the environment pollution. And later people rushed to purchase those vehicles which were the manufacturing which was banned subsequently. That is nothing but the impact of international treaties relating to environment. So that we have to see the responsibility of state in different fields in responsibility for breach of treaties, responsibility for environment degradation, responsibility for harm to head of state, individuals, And when state will be responsible for the wrongful acts committed by its citizens, its officers, its organs, because state being an abstract entity, state doesn't do anything. State have to act through human agencies. So the there is nexus, there should be established nexus between person acting and that particular state. Then only state can be held responsible. So to held state responsible, there were certain theories like fault or subjective theory, risk or objective theory, electric theories of responsibility and absolute liability. Now you can recall your law of tort. The same principles we have to study here. In law of tort, you had seen the liability, isn't it? Liability principle. Same principle we have to study here. Two kind of liabilities you studied or read, though not held because of the lockdown. Strict liability and absolute liability. Individuals are strictly liable for the wrongful acts committed by them, and absolutely liable. So that liability we have to see. Strictly liable, there were certain defenses available. But in case of absolute liability, no defense available. If there is wrongful act, whatever the way in which it is done, then state is considered as absolutely liable. Now in the age of codification, generally these liabilities were drafted beforehand. If this and this is to be done, then state can be held absolutely liable. So here we have to see one doctrine of culpa. Culpa means culpable. Culpable in the sense actionable. When the act of state is actionable, culpable homicide you had seen in IPC. There is a homicides, but whether homicide is culpable, then it the criminal liability arose. If the homicide is not culpable, no criminal liability arises. What is homicide? Homicide. Chat box waiting for you. Murder. Murder is one homicide. But what homicide is? Cut to the kill. By whom? In more better manner. Cut human body into pieces. But by whom? That is important. Act of one person. Yes, one human being, yes, killing another human being. Killing of another human without justification. Homicide means killing of human being by a human being. That's what earlier no case was registered by Maharashtra government in Sushant Singh case. It was not known that whether it was homicide or even suicidal death. That's what enquiry was started under 174 Act to killing human to another. Simply homicide means killing of human being by a human being. Then the question arose whether it is culpable. If there is a killing of human being by animal by way of machineries, it is not homicide. But once there is involvement of human agency, the homicide becomes culpable. What day after day before, I think yesterday, one five-storied building was collapsed in Mahad. You might have been watched the news. And later offences were registered against the builder and all other persons involved into the construction. Now there were killing of human beings. Now the question is whether it is homicide, whether human agency is involved, be by way of negligence, intentions, etc. So culpability means to hold some person liable. That is called as culpable. If not, then merely it is a homicide, non-culpable. So it will not give rise to punishment. So accidental deaths are not homicides. But once there is involvement of human being, that is called as homicide. So here we have to see the culpable element from the point of view of state. Whether state's involvement is there, like see the example of China, whether the COVID-19 was spread by the China intentionally. In such cases, the state responsibility of China will arise. And there, the culpability of the China can be tested. During the lockdown, several petitions were filed by some persons for sake of publicity into the different courts to initiate action against the China. However, all those petitions were dismissed by the court because these courts are not competent or individuals are not having jurisdiction in this sense because that is the question of public international law wherein state has to file the case. If the Indian government or other nations approach to the ICJ, International Court of Justice, and they filed case there, then the question is arose. Merely writing letter to the International Court of Justice is not the way to approach ICJ. Those things were done during the lockdown by some lawyers for the sake of publicity to appear their name into the newspaper. Later, all those petitions were dismissed by the court because their state is required to file the case. State in the sense Indian government. Or if the citizens agree, they has to approach to the government of India, particularly Ministry of External Affairs, alleging that these things are there, file action against China. So that we have to see under module 9. Then module 10 deals with the law of treaties. So it laid down detail how treaties are entered into, etc. So still two modules were remaining to discuss. Tomorrow, I think we will finish the discussion on all the 12 modules. And the day after tomorrow, we will directly go to the teaching module 1. Prior to that, I will post the study material of module 1 into the Google Classroom. So it will be get easy for you to understand what is going on. So, okay, I am leaving the call right now. See you tomorrow.